Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Traffic Council meeting for June 15th. We're going to begin with introductions. My name is David Kozis. I am the Transportation Coordinator from the Public Works Department. And Captain Doucette, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Damien Doucette, I'm the Traffic Bureau Commander.
And Isaac, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure thing. Isaac Prezant, Traffic Engineer with DPW.
Okay. Mitch.
Mitch Fishman, Resident Representative.
Hi, Mitch. And then Jeremy, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Jeremy Freudberg, alternate citizen representative.
And we're joined by Councilor Markowitz. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Chris Markowitz, City Councilor.
All right. Thank you all. So we're going to begin the evening with our first item of the night, which is TC 6522. It's David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, and Isaac Prezant, Traffic Engineer, on the suggestion of the Newton Fire Department, requesting to restrict parking on both sides of the narrow section of Troy Lane, as well as around the cul-de-sac, in order to ensure access for trash, recycling, and emergency vehicles. Parking would not be restricted on either side of the wide section of Troy Lane. So we'll begin with a quick presentation, and then we can open it up for public comment. So this item we actually heard earlier this year at our January 19th meeting. This is Troy Lane. It's a dead-end street. And I have some slides that we showed back at the January meeting that I'll go through, and then a few additional slides at the end. So here's a view of Troy Lane looking south from Fuller Street. It's pretty wide at the beginning. It's 28 or 29 feet wide, but then it gets very quickly quite narrow in the middle of the street, only 15 or 16 feet wide. So here's a view of a car that's parked, a small car that's parked in the narrow section of Troy Lane. Even without snow, even a small car parked there, it leaves only 8 or 9 feet. Not enough room for certainly an emergency vehicle to get through, or trash or recycling. And let's just go on to the next slide. So here's a view of the cul-de-sac, the end of the street, and another view of the cul-de-sac. So, so we heard this item in January. There were no restrictions on either side of the street at that point. The recommendation in January was to hold this item as a trial. It's been held since January. We did a trial to restrict parking along the narrow section of the street and around the cul-de-sac. So that was the Traffic Council vote. And then, so here's an image of what we imagined it would be like when we allowed no parking after a certain point on Troy Lane. So we held it for a trial, and the trial was no parking along from a certain section through the narrow section and around the cul-de-sac. We posted signs. Here's an example of the signs that we posted since January. I went out 10 times to take a look in May and June and count the number of cars that were parked on the east side and the west side of the wide section. That's the two columns shown in green, as well as how many vehicles were parked along the narrow section, or the cul-de-sac, the no parking section. That's the column that's shown in red. So for these observations, which I just picked random times and drove down there, I saw between maybe 4 vehicles parked on the on the wider section, the first part of Troy Lane, maybe up to 8 cars. They were almost always all parked on the east side of the street, the times that I went. Only one time I saw a car parked on the west side, where it is legal to park on the west side under the trial. a couple times I saw a car parked in the narrow section, or around the cul-de-sac. Usually they seem to be, well, the times that I was there, they were landscape vehicles or trucks that at one point there was a pretty big, well, there was a truck that was parked in the narrow section. I couldn't get through at all. That was this entry on June 5th. I would note that every time that I was there, all 10 times, I did see the cars that were parked on the east side were parked in either direction, pointing to the south or pointing to the north. So I just sort of highlighted that because that is not allowed. That is against our ordinances, and it could be the case that a car that's parked pointing in the wrong direction could receive a parking ticket, which would be a valid ticket. You should be turning around and parking in the correct direction. You shouldn't be driving on the wrong side of the road. So our recommendation tonight, we think that the trial made it safer on the street for emergency vehicles, trash, recycling vehicles. And so we're recommending to approve the docketed item to make the trial permanent, keep the signage the way that it is posted right now. And since the trial began, we would make that happen by voting with this language that we see on this slide. And let me just try and move some. Okay. So there is a 20-day appeals period. If we do vote on this, we do have a chance for an appeal, which we can get into later on. But right now, that's the end of this presentation. I want to open it up to public comment. If anyone from the public would like to make a comment on this item or how the trial went, if you could please raise your hand and we will call on you. And again, maybe Isaac can help me just look for anyone who might be raising their hand.
No one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I see that we are joined by Councillor Wright from Ward 3 and Councillor Greenberg from Ward 1. Okay, so we did receive one public comment through an email, which what we received this from number 5 Troy Lane, who suggested that parking be prohibited on the entire west side of Troy Lane, even along the wide section of Troy Lane. That's the only feedback we've received. Okay, so what are the thoughts of the members of Traffic Council? Any comments? Anyone like to make a motion?
My general thoughts are, considering the amount of folks that came out to the initial meeting that have not expressed any concerns since the trial, I would think that's essentially a good result. So I'd be in favor of making the trial permanent.
Thank you, Isaac. And we did, if you remember, in the January meeting, there was a request that we hold this item all the way until the beginning of the summer because they just wanted to see maybe there's more cars that start parking on the street in June. So we did do that. So any other comments before someone makes a motion? Mitch?
So again, similar to Isaac, I went out there, looked at it. It looked like it was quite orderly in the wider section. I think it'll always be a little difficult in the narrow section. Landscapers, FedEx, whatever. There may be some internal signage that, if things get bad out there, but I think we've done about as much as we can do. So I would support this become permanent. Yeah.
Thank you, Mitch. Anyone else? Okay, well, in that case, I would like to make a motion to approve the language. This would be TPR 877, right? Right, Danielle?
Yes,
TPR
correct.
877. Okay,
Yes.
so I'll make a motion to approve the language of TPR 877 for TC 6522 to make the trial permanent by adding this specific language as shown on slide 15 into our traffic and parking regulations. Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Fishman,
Yes,
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye,
Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0.
thank you very much. And again, we have this, I can't see the bottom of my slide, but what does this yellow box say? We have until, what is it, July 15th?
July 5.
July 5th, until this becomes permanently, until it becomes permanent. This could be appealed for the next 20 days. The signage is already installed, so it really wouldn't make any difference, and it seems unlikely that this item would be appealed. But if anyone wants to appeal it, you can contact the clerk's office. Okay, so our next item then is TC 2323. This is Jason Sobel, Director of Transportation Operations, and Joshua Ostroff, Director of Transportation Planning, requesting to update the traffic and parking regulations in order to allow non-motorized vehicles or bicycles to legally travel southbound on the one-way northbound block of Brookside Avenue between Watertown Street and Albemarle Road. Okay, so this is the section of Albemarle that we are talking about. This is Albemarle here. We have the NECP. We have the pool a little further and Day Middle School. This is northbound and southbound on Albemarle. And here's Watertown Street. So we're talking about this one block right here. When you go out there now, you'll notice, and let me go back one slide. So I should say, so this one block is one way in the northbound direction, right? So here's a view of it when you're looking south from Watertown Street, that all the vehicles are traveling northbound. You have parking on both sides, parking up to a certain, maybe about this point actually on the Brookside. So this is part of a larger design that we've been working on for quite some time, all the way from Washington Street up to, up Albemarle, beyond Craft Street. But all we're really talking about right now is this one intersection. So the idea is that you could ride your bicycle from Washington Street up Albemarle Road you see this marked bike lane right here, come to the light, wait for the light to turn green, then you can continue across what we're calling these cross bikes. So we have crosswalks here. This is like a cross bike for the bicyclists to continue northbound in the northbound bike lane up to Craft Street and beyond. And then in the southbound direction, we would also have a bike lane coming down southbound, coming to the signal right here, going, if you would like to continue down onto Washington Street, you would now have the choice to continue through this cross bike and then in a bike lane right here and continue down in this contraflow bike lane in this direction and continuing down to Washington Street. That's the concept. So the recommendation is to allow bicycles on this block. So it stays one way, except bicycles are allowed to travel through here. So that is our recommendation. We could either hold this for a trial. Other parts of this plan are also being held for a trial further to the north with the reverse angle parking, etc. So we might choose to hold this as a trial as well. And all we're talking about is allowing bicycles. So all traffic council would need to do would, again, be add that one sign to allow bicycles onto this block. We could hold it for a trial, see how that goes, or we could go ahead and vote to approve the item. And this is the language that we would be voting on. Simply, it's in the one-way streets section of our traffic and parking regulations. Simply changing it from one-way. Actually, you know what? I think that this slide is not correct because that one little block officially is called Albemarle Road. Right now, it's listed as one-way Brookside Avenue, so we would be removing that. But actually, what I think we would be inserting is that it's a one-way street on Albemarle Road from Brookside Avenue to Watertown Street, except non-motorized vehicles. Do you agree with that change, Isaac?
David, I'm
Because I
not too
believe
sure.
that one block is called Albemarle Road, not Brookside. The
David,
one
you're
block that we're
correct.
talking about.
Is that right?
David, you're correct. That stretch of
Okay.
road is actually Albemarle.
Yeah,
No,
so
I
So
hate
if
to
we-
contradict anyone, but it is Brookside.
I believe that we researched it thoroughly and it's Albemarle.
Okay, I
So-
researched it thoroughly too, but that's fine.
How did you research it?
I hope I don't have to separate the two of you.
So we researched it by calling the engineering department and looking through the official regs. So that's why we believe that this was incorrect in the books. It's not actually Brookside Avenue. It's Albemarle Road at that one block. But we might not even be voting to make this permanent right now. We might be voting simply as a trial, so we could come back to this slide later on. But that is the presentation. I'm going to open it up now for public comment. And we'll start with Councillor Wright. And you're muted, Councillor Wright. So Councillor Wright, you need to unmute.
Yeah, I was actually just looking in the assessor's database, and it's called both Albemarle Road and Brookside Ave. My
Yeah.
question though is there going to be like flex posts or something like that separating the bike lane from the rest of the street? Because the cars there, I don't think, are used to having a bike lane there, and now you have bikes going two directions, and I just think it may be a little dangerous.
So, and Isaac can chime in since you've been working on this maybe a little bit more than I have. My understanding is that the marked bike lanes will just be at the very beginning, this couple feet maybe, and then we're not removing any parking. Parking is already allowed maybe at this point. You can see sort of around here where my cursor is where parking is allowed. So we're not removing any parking. We're just having some, marked bike lanes and then some sharrows painted in the road.
So the bikes going.
There are recommended, this current design shows flex, specifically notes that there would be flex posts on these bike lanes. I'm not sure if there would be flex posts here. That is something that we could find out later, but as far as traffic council is not going to vote on flex posts.
Yeah.
All we really need to vote on right now is, are we allowing bicycles to travel southbound on this block?
So at the beginning of the block, they would have a dedicated lane, but after that, they'll be sharing the road going the opposite direction of cars.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can't see the bottom of my screen, but I think that I remember that there was a distance on this slide that says 16.5 feet between parked vehicles. So
Okay, it's not
there's
that far.
confidence that there would be enough room for a car and a bicycle in the opposite direction.
Okay. I mean, as a bicyclist in that area, which I don't take that lane, but I go to Watertown and I go up on Albemarle. As a bicyclist, I would be worried about it because the cars are just not used to having bikes coming straight at them and that they're sharing the lane. Usually you share a lane with the bikes on on your right side. If it's not going to be a dedicated lane the whole side, but
Right. So we did this along the entire carriageway. So the carriageway, not too long ago,
Which carriageway?
the whole entire carriageway, the whole Commonwealth Avenue carriageway,
Okay.
where bicycle travel was, it always occurred in both
Yeah.
directions, even though it was a one-way street. And we went through the process at Traffic Council of every block
Mhm.
indicating, and you can go and see all the signage that's
Yeah.
been posted there. It all says one way, do not enter except bicycles.
Yeah.
So,
The carriageway, though, most cars only travel for a block. Here, cars may be traveling from Washington Street to Watertown Street and beyond, and it's more of a road versus the carriageway. I just worry, and then probably a different conversation with someone without dedicated bike lanes going in the opposite direction. I'm a little worried on that.
right. So I think that that's one reason that we might, and that's why I put this, that's why I phrased this slide the way I did, that it might make sense to hold this as a trial. Where the whole project is basically it's pretty much a trial with the reverse angled parking that was presented to City Council. It's a trial.
Yeah.
And
I think
maybe-
a trial. Well, I
Mhm.
think a trial would be good, and then you're doing all this other stuff on the trial. This one probably will get the least amount of complaints compared to the other things that's going on trial in this area.
Yeah,
The
you may
reverse
be right.
back in, and you're taking away the lane at that right turn at the end at Craft Street. I expect that's where I'll get most of the complaints.
It could be. So we might want to also hold this as a trial, see how it goes, be out there observing what are drivers doing, see if there's any tweaks that we should make. That's a possibility. I want to hear what
Is-
other folks say.
Is
Mhm.
and just one more thing? I'm sorry
Yeah.
to take so much time.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it possible when you get to that stretch to have a sign for motorists saying, bikes are coming at you, basically, or something of that sort? That I don't know if there's some to make motorists aware that this is a one way, but there are bikes coming at you.
Yes,
Yes.
that's being incorporated into the design work with the consultant right now. We're gonna focus at the intersection of Brookside and Albemarle, where it transitions from two-way to one-way, to really set the awareness at that.
Okay, because that'll make me feel a lot better at that point. Yes,
Absolutely. Yep.
thank you.
If
And
you don't mind, I can,
we always had the idea of putting in markings in the road, the bicycle markings, the sharrows, so that motorists would be able to see the paint in the road as well as signage, as posted signage.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Markowitz.
Thanks, Chair. I think the most I could go on this would be a trial. I'm also very familiar with this. I got to tell you, I don't think I have ever. So my north and south gets mixed up here a little bit because I sometimes think it's actually east and west and not north and south. But setting that aside, I'm coming from the side where Fessenden is. Okay.
Yeah,
So
over here.
Yeah, exactly. I just head straight across and I go down to the first intersection. I take a left there and I go up to Washington Street that way. I
Well,
understand.
yeah.
Well, hold
So
on.
when you,
Oh,
can I just
yeah.
say when that's the whole idea of sort of jogging over this way is because this street is the direct connection straight down to Washington
I
Street.
get it. No,
When
I
you're on
totally-
Albemarle,
I
it goes,
totally understand.
okay,
it.
so you recognize that.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do here. I completely understand. I think it's a good idea in some ways, but I'm telling you, I always do it the other way. Whenever I saw the, one way, if I'm heading down just Watertown Street, that do not enter sign to a cyclist to me is like, don't go there. You're asking for it. You're going to head on into traffic, which you wouldn't do. But because the spirit of this is really to try and put a path all the way from the river basically to Washington Street and then points beyond, I guess, which I think is a great idea. It's worth trying. I just would not, and given the fact that everything else is on trial, just being consistent here, but I do offer you that thing. I mean, I've typed this a lot of times and I just, I'm fine with doing it the other way. I think if you had we've had this discussion about length of bike trails so many times. I mean, Riverside, I think we beat it to death at least 16,000 times, maybe. A few feet here and there is is cool, it's convenient and so forth. But I actually don't know if it's that big of a deal here. But again, a trial I think is probably the way to go on this, and then everybody will have a chance to see this has been a problem, has not been a problem. There are a lot of cars parked over there too. you know? And the other thing, what was the other comment about, the two-way thing with the carriageway, I totally supported the two-way there, but there isn't that much traffic on there. It's not I think this is a busier piece of street and it's a shorter piece of street. When you see people on the carriageway and you're walking out for a walk, you kind of give them a dirty look unless you know that they're local traffic. Like, are you lost? What are you doing? You got a perfectly good Route 30 over here. You don't need the carriageway. So I think they're kind of different types of streets too, but I'd support a trial. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Markowitz. Other comments? Mitch?
So my first inclination was to say this was not a good idea. I'm not sure it is. I would support a trial, but I would only support a trial if some of these flex posts could be put in, particularly what do you call it, Brookside or Albemarle, at the mouth of the reverse area. And I think these flex posts would, and I guess we don't do that, right, David? It's not our hunt, the flex posts.
Well, if it's a trial, we can make that recommendation.
Okay, so I would recommend two things on the, maybe even three on the making that safer. One is in that area where you have the reverse flow, I don't know what you call it, the ladder white, next to the green. I would put flex posts in that area, number one. Number two, I would put flex posts in Watertown Street, where the bikes coming off of Albemarle will be making a left turn and then a quick right turn. It's going to make them safer and perhaps make sure they don't jog into the travel lane. And then for cars coming up on Albemarle to the intersection, it would seem to me there might be the bikes are given a directional flow to make that right turn. I don't know what the right answer is, but right now it looks sort of reasonably unsafe, but I would support a trial.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Other comments? Other comments from anyone?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, this is Isaac here. DPW does have some radar recorders out there this week. So that'll be used as pre-installed data. So we can, we'll definitely have data before and after on top of observations and any other metrics we come up with.
Okay. Very good. Okay, anyone else? Anyone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to hold this as a trial, David.
Okay, so we have a motion to hold this as a trial. We're already holding the other section, that long block of Albemarle, all the way between Watertown Street and Craft Street as a trial. So we would also be holding this as a trial. That would allow us to move forward with the pavement markings over the summer, get some observations, especially when school comes back in. We would be able to look for opportunities to add additional flex posts in this area, double, triple check the name of that block right there, and then come back at some point in the future and see if we want to vote to make it permanent or make any changes, right? Any other comments? We have a motion to hold for a trial. I guess, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's held 5-0.
All right, very good. Thank you. And we can move on to our next item. Okay, so our next item is TC 2123. Right. David Kosis, Traffic Council Chair, on behalf of neighborhood residents, requesting to discuss and potentially restrict parking at all times on one side of Johnson Place to help improve safety. So here is the location of Johnson Place. It is a dead-end street off of Auburn Street. It's part of the overall Auburndale Village Parking District. Here is the location of Johnson Place. You see that it's shown in red on both sides, which means that when you go to the street, you'll see that the posted signage is a 2-hour limit, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., except by Auburndale permit. So the residents who live on Johnson Place are the ones who are able to get a permit if they wish to, and visitor passes to be able to park for more than 2 hours during that restricted time. Otherwise, vehicles could only park for 2 hours. So here's a view of the street. It's 23 feet wide. Here's another view. This is looking from Auburn Street to the south. Notice that most of the east side has no sidewalk. So this did come to us from a resident of the street who was concerned about parking on both sides because of the narrowness of the street, making sure that emergency vehicles could get through. And so that is our recommendation.
Come on.
Okay, can everyone mute, please? Thank you. So that is our recommendation to approve this item so that we would prohibit parking on the east side of Johnson Place and no change to the west side. The signs on the west side would continue, still be 2-hour limit, except by Auburndale permit, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So now I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone from the street or anyone from the public wish to speak on this item, if you could raise your hand.
Hello?
Yes, I see Sandra Swanson raised her hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm at 6 Johnson Place, so I'm the first house on the left when you come on the street. First of all, thank you for looking at this because it is a problem. We have a lot of construction also going on our street right now and on Auburn Street. And so a lot of construction vehicles have been parking on our street. My question is really not whether you approve this or not. My question is, how do we enforce this? Because as you said, it has the 2-hour parking limit already, but that's not really being followed, and that's part of the problem. So I'd be interested in comments on how you actually go about enforcing whatever you might look to approve today.
Captain Doucette, did you want to respond to that question about
Sure,
enforcement?
sure. So usually the police department, we rely on the citizens to call us when they observe people violating the restrictions. So if you call us at the traffic bureau or our main dispatch, we'll send out a parking control officer to cite the violators if they observe it.
Is that the 796-2106 number?
That's the traffic bureau or 2123 for dispatch.
Right. So we have parking control officers, but they have to cover the entire city. So they do, a lot of enforcement on their own, but if there is a resident that calls to request additional enforcement, that would probably be the best way to get enforcement.
If I can, Mr. Koza's point of
Yes.
privilege. So this is my ward. I know the area fairly well. It is difficult because of the 2-hour thing. They actually have to track. I believe, Captain, correct me here if I'm wrong, but they mark it and they have to try, map the 2-hour. But having said that, this is the type of thing. If you've got construction activity and there's a lot of this going on, the violations, by calling in, I think you get it on the radar. And then people actually might go out there earlier in the day and keep an eye on that, and then have a better sense of when be more able to address the violation there. But I hear you on they're not respecting this, and there needs to be, I guess, a little more attention drawn to it. So even though it can be somewhat random, you need to think about a way to say, call them earlier in the day, let them know it's happening, and then a couple hours later, they'll be able to go out and check this stuff. I don't know, Captain, if you have a better idea than that, but it sounds like you got one of these kind of recurring, it might not last forever, but for right now, it's a problem.
So to use the example of if we end up in passing and restricting the parking on the east side, if someone's parked there, they can cite them right then and there for that restriction. In regards to the 2 hours, we have to observe the car there for the 2 hours. So say it's 10 a.m., they come out, they make note of the vehicle, they come back at like 12:10. The car's still in the same spot, they will cite the vehicle for the 2 hour restriction. So we can put it on our radar for a few weeks to kind of hammer home the point. But like David pointed out, we have to cover the whole city and we only have 10 PCOs.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I was hoping you would say what you did. So I think that's good. That's really but I wanted Ms. Swanson to understand that that's really kind of the extent of how you can manage this type of thing. It's unfortunate though that, you do get construction sometimes, and some contractors just don't follow the rules, and you got to kind of keep an eye out for them.
All right, thank you. Anthony King.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. I actually second the comment that was made prior to me about the enforcement. So it's definitely helpful to hear what can be done and the number to call. So we'll definitely do that. I actually live on a corner of Auburn Street and Johnson Place. And my understanding was that it was to have parking restricted on the west side as opposed to the east side. And it's because mostly me living there, I actually have my driveway blocked constantly, either by construction or just random people parking there. So that was my understanding of this motion tonight. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And maybe I have a misunderstanding of which side is the east side and which side is the west side. So that's my main concern. We constantly have people blocking our driveway, and to the extent that the driveway isn't very large as it is, and we are a 2-car household. And so even maneuvering out of the small driveway when we're blocked is problematic. And also being on the corner, if people turn, because it's so narrow, and you have people parking closer to the corner, it's definitely a safety concern, when people turn from Auburn Street onto Johnson Place. So those are the main, my main issues there. We've even asked to have our curb cut, which we've been waiting for since last August. So just to kind of alleviate some of the problems that we've had, from this issue.
Can you confirm which is the east and which is the west side, and where's going to be no parking?
And who's speaking, please?
This is Liz. I live on the street also further down.
Okay, and can you say your address, please?
35 Johnson Place.
Thank you. So the way that this was docketed was to consider restricting parking on one side of the street. The concern was for emergency vehicles to be able to get through. So, when we took a look at the street, you could see that that the east side of the street has no sidewalks, right? So the west side has the utility poles, which with the signs, the 2-hour parking signs. The east side has some signs posted in the bushes that you can't see. There's no sidewalk. Here's another view. This is the east side with the wall and no sidewalk. So
yeah, no one ever parks on the east side.
We feel like it makes more sense to restrict parking on that side of the street because you can't get out of your car. If you park there, there's a wall there, there's no sidewalk there. So that's the recommendation. The most important thing is to make sure that emergency vehicles could get down the street, that you would never have a time that you have parking on both sides of the street. I would also say that if, we do hear this complaint every week from somewhere in the city, at least once a week. that cars are parked too close to someone's driveway and they have a difficult time getting out of their driveway. So we were talking about enforcement before. It is a city ordinance that no vehicle could park within 5 feet of any driveway in the city. So if there are vehicles that are parked closer than 5 feet from your driveway, I would recommend that you consider calling that number, the traffic bureau number, the 617-796-2106 number, and requesting enforcement for vehicles parked too close to your driveway. We need to make sure that you're able to get in and out of your driveway.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, well, I guess I very rarely see any parking on the east side. It's always the west side. And the main concern is the narrow entrance to Johnson Place from Auburn Street, which is where I live. So if no parking from the corner of Johnson Street, probably 300 feet or 100 feet back is probably the best, on the west side is probably the best solution, because people typically don't park that far back. I'm not, I can't say that definitively because, I don't, always monitor it, but it seems like it's always from the corner to the end of my driveway is where people park. So the west side is the best side to have that no parking.
Actually, it isn't, because the road narrows towards the end where I live. And if you have parking on the west side, on the east side, I can't leave my driveway, and neither can my neighbors, because they'll block us in. The street's too narrow at that point. That's why no one parks on that side now. And if you restrict them not parking on the west side, they will park on the east side, and I'll be blocked in, and so will my two neighbors on either side of me, because the street narrows significantly as it turns the corner.
Okay,
Do you have anyone parking?
So-
Do you have
All right,
anyone parking in front of your house
please,
now?
Okay, excuse me. Let's just speak to traffic council. We're not having a private conversation. Mr. King, would you like to make another comment?
Yeah, so my thought is, if there's no parking on the east side, I don't believe that will stop the issue at hand right now, as far as the narrowness. I don't believe, I have not seen people parking on either east or west side further back on Johnson Place. So that's why I don't necessarily feel as if no parking should be prohibited in the entire street, but at least on the entry part of Auburn Street, say 100 feet. That's my, that seems rational to me.
And of course, another option is to try something here. If we restrict parking, let's say on the east side of the street, see how that goes. If maybe that will solve enough of the problem. And if there continues to be a problem with parking close to Auburn Street, docket another traffic council item in the future to further restrict parking. We do try to to approve the least restrictive changes. We don't want to unnecessarily restrict parking. We can always add more restrictions later. I see Sandra Swanson you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Anthony is saying. I think, and I have experienced this personally, when you're coming up Auburn and you make a right onto Johnson Place, it's very hard to see when you're coming around the corner if anyone is parked in front of Anthony's house, if it's going to be too close to Auburn. You can't really see that until you've made the turn. And if they're parked too close, you're going to rear end them. So I think, what he's trying to say is if the parking is going to be on his side of the street, it's going to have to be further down, because that's a real blind spot coming around that corner when you're making a right off of Auburn.
Okay. And one other thing that I might as well say is we do have the authority to restrict parking administratively up to 50 feet of an intersection, even without a traffic council vote. That could be based on engineering judgment. So if we do, let's say, take a vote today to restrict parking on the east side, we could also invite one of our traffic engineers to go and take a look and see if it is important and I guess useful or safer, I guess is the word, safer to restrict parking up to 50 feet from the corner of Auburn Street without voting on that through traffic council. Okay, did that make sense?
So if I may, I'll say this. So this is Isaac, traffic engineer. So there was a question earlier from Anthony, I believe, of what 100 feet would look like as a restriction on the west side. So I'm just measuring off of Google Earth here. 100 feet takes you through your driveway. So that would essentially completely restrict parking through the full frontage of your home. You may not have an issue with that. Maybe you don't have guests often or whatever it may be, but that's just a consideration should you have an occasional need to park in front of your home, but not within your driveway. I'm happy to get feedback there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally happy with that.
With 100?
With 100, it could be 50, just as long as my driveway is not blocked. But if 100 feet goes past my driveway, then that on the west side, then that definitely suits my needs.
But again, like we were saying before, this is an issue for every driveway in the entire city. That's why we have that regulation of no parking within 5 feet of any driveway in the city. So we don't want to have your driveway blocked by having cars parked too close to your driveway, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have a comment and I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
And who's speaking, please?
My name is Carrie Torres. We
Yes.
live at can you hear me?
Yes.
We live at 41 Johnson Place, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac. And I would just echo what Anthony and Sandra have said about the end of the street. But I would add, it's also not that we need additional ammunition here. It's also challenging getting out of the street, turning either left or right onto Auburn when there are vehicles parked on sometimes both sides. So it's an issue going both ways. I would also note that we have called traffic several times and they've been incredibly responsive. So we're very appreciative of that. But honestly, I would have to call every single day. So, you know, I don't know necessarily if further monitoring needs to happen, but dispatch might be getting sick of hearing from me because I'm calling a lot. And I think, as someone noted earlier, there's a lot of activity here right now because there's a lot of construction going on. I think, as somebody noted, once you get past the bend in the road, it is wider and a little bit easier to navigate. And it doesn't appear to me that trash or recycling vehicles have trouble getting down this end of the street, but it is very much at the beginning of the street up until the bend that we have real concerns about safety.
Okay, thank you. And so the cars that are parking on the street right now, I would assume that they're either residents of the street or visitors of people who live on the street or related to the construction. Because, I mean, this is the whole reason that we created this Auburndale Village parking district in the first place, was that this was several years ago, that at this point, that we heard so many complaints from so many residents in this whole area about commuters parking on their street and walking over to Auburndale Station, just parking all day, or even walking to Riverside, or the students at LaSalle. That's why this whole parking district was created. And a lot of those comments and complaints have totally gone away because you can't park all day unless you could, and then possibly get a ticket. But I think the number of people who do that are much lower now. So it's probably not commuters that are parking there all day, I would guess. It probably are vehicles that somehow are related to some activity on the street. Construction happens all over the city, on my street, on, you know, and so, you know, whenever you have construction, you have temporarily a lot of activity and a lot of vehicles, and that's not always going to be the case. The construction will end at some point. So I guess that's my question. Is there any reason to believe that the cars that are parked there all day are somehow not related to any activity on the street?
It's Sandra again. I'll jump in. I believe, yes, it's largely related to the construction. We have construction that's happening on Johnson Place, but there's also construction happening right across from Johnson Place on Auburn Street, right? So first there was one house that was torn down. It's now been fully built. And now they just tore down another one and that's being put up. And so what you end up having is some of the contractors associated with other construction and things that happen on Auburn Street who have nowhere else to park. So they end up parking on our street. At least that's my own observation.
Right. So I think that we just need to be a little bit careful that we don't approve some permanent regulations and permanent inconvenience for some activity that is really temporary in nature. Something to think about. We don't, you know, I guess we could always change something later, but maybe we should recognize that there is a lot, I mean, there's a lot of construction happening on Johnson Place and in so many places around the city. But then it'll end and move to another street. Other comments? Okay. So, traffic council members, what do you guys think? We have an option here that we could vote on, which would restrict parking on the east side and leave it the same on the west side. We could do a trial. We could just vote this and see if the residents are strongly enough opposed that they decide to appeal this decision. Councilor Markowitz.
Thanks, Mr. Coates. Well, are we solving, having listened to the testimony from all the folks on Johnson Place, my question is, I mean, kind of back to the engineer and you, I'm a little confused. Are we actually solving the problem with this restriction now, or do we need to modify this to some other form of restriction? You know, being the 50-foot or the 100-foot thing, which was mentioned, which made a lot of sense to me, basically. Or, you know, do we need the east side, you know, prohibition now? So I guess that's my question back. I want to make sure that we're actually solving what we think now, having had this conversation for the last 10, 15 minutes.
Well, so that's for other traffic council members to weigh in as well. The most important thing in my mind, just like you see several other streets, you could see several streets have
I got you on the
have a restriction on
fire
one
engines,
side, like
you know, the
no
safe-
parking on one side, and a restriction on the other. You know, a 2-hour limit. You see that over here. You see it on this street as well. This street as well. Fern Street. It's all just because the street's not really wide enough to safely allow parking on both sides. So, I mean, to me, that is the critical thing, to make sure that ambulances, fire trucks could get down the street when they need to. Beyond that, parking next to people's driveway, that's an issue across the city in my mind. And like we said, we do have the administrative authority to restrict parking up to 50 feet from any intersection, including Auburn Street, based on engineering judgment. And that's something that we could also specify as part of this vote. Mitch?
All right, so I got you on the safety thing, and that makes sense. Okay, so that would stand then, but I'm asking, I guess, do we need to also have the administrative control on top of that? Because that would be both sides, right?
Well, that would be not part of our vote.
Right,
Our
understand that.
vote,
But I'm saying just
because our
understand-
vote is specifically changing, you know, the language in
Right.
the traffic and parking regulations.
I get that. I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone here a little bit and say, and not to dock it, not to, you know, put the request in necessarily, but also to make sure that the residents there understand that there's likely to be a follow-on on top of, you know, the putting the prohibition on the east side. That's all.
So Isaac, what do you think? If we vote to restrict parking on one side, what do you think about one of our, like you or one of our other traffic engineers going to take a look and determining based on safety whether an additional parking restriction is required near the intersection?
So I don't have an issue with taking an iterative approach, but it seems like at least restricting the first 50 feet on the west side is very reasonable, and we can do that now, David, in my opinion, which saves me the trouble of having to go through the process of an administrative parking restriction. Not that it is a difficult process, but it is a process that can be avoided if we do it now.
Okay, so is that a suggestion that you are making to amend this slide?
Yes, I'd like to. And then again, you know, we're very approachable and reachable. So Mr. King, if you'd like to, you know, if we get to a point where that's installed and you still have recurring issues, then perhaps we need to return to look at 100-foot restriction. But again, I'm fine with taking that type of approach step by step.
Okay. So is someone trying to speak?
I think he just said thank you.
Okay. Mitch,
So, so I have a couple questions. One is, if we do a trial, is that appealable?
No.
and you cannot appeal a trial because it's not actually voting to approve something.
Okay, so I guess, I mean, my inclination is to go for a permanent solution with Isaac's amendment and to see if the 50-foot works. If not, you know, particularly with the neighbor at the corner, you know, I guess, you know, that could be an administrative whatever at that point. I think the construction there may be, you know, more intense now, but, you know, there's certainly a lot of construction in the area, and I think other parking restrictions probably lead people to this, you know, this street in any case. So I think, you know, doing a permanent relief would probably be the best thing. However, if I'm worried that if we do a permanent one and then there is an appeal, that would delay it significantly. And, you know, I mean, I don't know that we have the right side, but I was thinking that, you know, if there was a restriction on the, I'll call it the house side versus where the no sidewalk is, and people pull out from their driveway in that area where cars are up against that wall or non-sidewalk area, that'll be very difficult to get out of. So I think we have the right side, assuming people aren't crowding out their driveways, which is a separate issue. So I think, you know, maybe I've been a little bit misleading, but I would say we probably should go for the permanent solution unless we feel like it's going to get challenged. I don't know how we deal with that. And if we feel it's going to get challenged, let's just do a trial.
Okay. So Isaac, can you just open up Google Maps real quickly and just look at the beginning of the street on the west side and see if there is a place to post a sign within 50 feet?
I think we'd be placing a new signpost.
So there's a sidewalk there that's wide enough
Yep.
to allow a new sign post to
Yep.
be put in the sidewalk, or is it in the grass?
Yeah, it'd be in the grass berm.
So there's a berm between the sidewalk and the street?
Yep.
Okay. So would you like to, I think that what you're saying is to edit this slide so that we would be removing the existing restrictions, adding a restriction that says 1, prohibited all days east side.
Yep.
2, prohibited all days west side from Auburn Street to a point 50 feet south of Auburn Street. And then
We can
3,
say
2-hour limit except by Auburndale permit 9 to 5 from a point 50 feet south of Auburn Street to the end on the west side.
Yep. Yeah. I would maybe slightly change the language for the new second bullet point and just say beginning Auburn Street, heading 50 feet southerly. Just sort of shortens the language a little bit.
Okay. Okay, so any comments on that change? Would you like to make that into a motion, Isaac?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion. Any comments before we vote? Does everyone understand what we're voting on? We're voting on this language with a new restriction that prohibits parking on the west side for the first 50 feet.
Why aren't we doing 100 feet? Because the biggest issue is the end of the street where Anthony lives and Sandra live, where you can't get in and out of our street. So why aren't we just going for 100 feet? Why just the 50?
I feel like that's a bigger restriction that we would have to hold this item, go and take a look, talk it through a little bit more and have another meeting about it.
Okay, okay.
That is, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Coase, but 50 feet, that's about 3 car lengths, right?
Yeah.
Just to count for
More than
reference.
2, yeah.
Yeah.
It basically, I think the whole point is to clear up the corner. So cars coming around the corner, there's not going to be a car parked right at the corner. That is the whole reason for this restriction, right, Isaac?
Right.
I don't think that we want to unnecessarily restrict parking further down when there's really nothing different about that parking space versus so many more all across the city. We're really focused on safety, right? Emergency vehicles and safety for moving and turning traffic. Okay, so I think we all understand what the motion is. If we do approve this motion, we do have the 20-day appeals period. And what does that say again? That little box on the bottom, is it July 5th, we said?
July 5th.
Okay, through July 5th. If someone strongly does not agree with this vote, you could appeal this vote, which means that the city council would take over this item and would make this whole discussion would happen again. Everyone would be notified again and city council would make the final decision. Otherwise, we would wait until after July 5th and then post the new signage and remove the existing signage that's no longer official. Okay, does everyone understand where we are? Danielle, can you call the roll?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye,
and Mr. Prezant. Okay,
Aye.
that's approved 5-0.
and that was TPR 878, right?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you all. And we're ready to move on to our next item. Okay. So our next item is TC 2223. This is David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove the accessible parking space at 58 Churchill Street as staff understands that this space is no longer being used. Okay, so this is the location of the accessible parking space at 58 Churchill Street. It's been posted here. You can see it on this slide right there. This is the accessible space. And so I did go out and talk to neighborhood residents to find out if this space is still being used. I found out that that it is not being used anymore. And so that's what we do at Traffic Council. We approve accessible spaces when someone in the neighborhood has a valid placard and uses that space to be able to get in and out of their home. And then when it's no longer being used, we need to vote through this process to remove the space officially. So that is our recommendation, to remove that accessible space. We would be waiting for a 20-day appeals process. If there are no appeals, then the sign would be removed after July 5th. So that is the whole presentation for this item. And I'm going to open it up for anyone who has a comment to raise their hand. And I don't see anyone raising their hand. And I do see we're joined by our ADA coordinator, Jeannie Fairley. And we are also joined by Councilor Oliver.
Jeannie's got her hand up now.
Okay, Jeannie.
I just wanted to thank you, David, and Transportation for doing their due diligence, because it's important to follow up on any request of an accessible parking space not needed anymore. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, so I will go ahead and make the motion to approve the language of TPR 879 to remove the accessible space at 58 Churchill Street. And Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0. That's TPR 879.
Okay, good, thank you. And we can go on to our next item. So our next item is TC 2423. This is Councilor Greenberg requesting to discuss and possibly modify the parking regulations on the west side of Adams Street within 50 feet of Clinton Street on both sides. Councilor Greenberg, did you want me to do the presentation first, or did you want to comment?
I'll say a few words first. Thank you, Mr. Kosis. The owners of Di Pasquale's deli corner store right there at the corner of Clinton and Adams Street, we're wondering if the no parking for 2 hours sign could be moved further. I have to get my north and south right.
Further to the north.
Further to the north, right? So that a car could park in front of the store, run in and pick up their sandwich and then leave. So like right now, there's not enough space for a car to do that. And then on the other side of Clinton and Adams, there's no sign that says no parking from here to the corner, making it difficult for folks to exit Clinton Street onto Adams Street, because it's hard to see the cars going south from Adams Street.
Okay, Councilor Greenberg, thank you. You basically did my whole presentation for me.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so I'll just run through this very quickly. This is the location that we're talking about. This is Clinton Street. This is Adams Street. With the two rectangles are the two areas that we'll be talking about. Don't forget, we had several meetings about the parking regulations on Adams Street not too long ago. We changed all the regulations up and down Adams Street. And so this would be a small change. This is the view of Di Pasquale that Councilor Greenberg was talking about at 241 Adams Street. And you can hopefully see the cursor. This is the sign that's been posted for a while now that says no parking here to corner. So this whole stretch from Clinton Street, the frontage of their store is no parking. And the request is to put a new post in on this side of the trash and recycling, I guess where this basket is right here, and put the no parking here to corner sign right there. So to create one new parking space right here. Then on the other side, this is the north side. There's currently no restriction. People could park all along here. It is a little bit, we do agree that it's a little bit more difficult when you're coming out Clinton Street. If there's a car parked right there on this corner, to be able to see around the southbound vehicles, right? So we did look at this. We had our traffic engineer come and take a look with me. And so we have some options of either denying the request or approving the request. If we do decide to approve the request where we would be adding a space on the south side of the intersection in front of De Pasquale's, and restricting parking on the north side of the intersection, basically using this utility pole so that there would be no parking, along the driveway and along the frontage, and opening up the sight lines for turning vehicles. Then this would be the language that we would be voting on, to remove the existing regulations on Adam Street, these particular restrictions, and adding them back in with these measurements. Okay. And so that's how we would be voting to add that parking space back in front of De Pasquale's and restricting parking on the other side. I think that is a spa, I believe, on that side, but I'm not sure. So those are our options, and I'm going to open it up for public comment. So Maureen and Steve De Pasquale. And if you can unmute, and then you can make your comment. Okay, so we can't hear anything so far.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. The reason that we are asking this now, it hasn't been a terrible problem. It's been a nuisance having that sign 100 feet from the curb and taking away a number of our parking spots. But now that you have restricted parking on the odd side of Clinton Street, it has caused all of the people that park on that side of Clinton Street to park on the even side of Clinton Street, taking up all of our parking spaces there, because for some reason, people who live there are not using their driveways, but parking on the street. So if you were to go down Clinton Street or up Clinton Street any time of the day, on my side, from my store back to that entire block that we have, they're all cars. So I've lost parking for my customers on Clinton Street, and I have one parking spot in front of my store, and it's just not adequate.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Yes, we did recently restrict parking on one side of Clinton Street, again, for emergency vehicle and safety. So basically what we would be doing is swapping parking, adding a space on one side and then removing a space on the other side. But we also do think that this is a slight safety improvement by taking this action. Other comments?
David, is it worth just pointing out the last public meeting that we had on Adams Street earlier this year? I think it was Councilor Leary and a couple other folks that felt pretty strongly about keeping that no parking here to corner.
Yeah, I would say when we made all of the changes up and down Adams Street, I did go, this was a sort of a big project, and I talked to many of the business owners, including this business, and I did come into that meeting with the recommendation of moving this sign further up toward Clinton Street and creating an extra space. That was the original proposal. At the meeting itself, we got pushback from several people, including some residents, that felt that would be making it less safe to exit off of Clinton Street. So that's why we sort of abandoned that change. And this is why we ended up with what we have now. We also definitely did not want to have a councilor docket an item to add a parking space on Adams Street and have traffic council end up denying that and also removing another space, right? So we didn't want that to happen. So we tried to look at this and think, what is the safest thing that we could do to be able to add that space back, without without losing parking on the street, right? So that's a little bit of history. So we do think it is safer to allow parking on this side of Adam Street versus the north, the other side of the intersection. I hope I explained that clearly. Any other comments? Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Kosas. I agree. I think it'd be easier to exit Clinton Street with a car not being parked on the north side of that corner than on the south side of that corner.
Right.
So I agree with you.
So that's what this language does, right?
Yeah,
Here.
yeah.
Councilor Fishman. Councilor Fishman, sorry.
You'd like me to run again?
That was a while ago.
I got a slot
Mitch.
for you, Mitch, if you're interested.
No, thank you. So David, could you go back to the photograph?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess two questions I have. I mean, I'm assuming if we voted this, we wouldn't, we have one counselor on the call. We're not going to get pushback on that issue at this point. The other question I have, the cars migrating to that side of Clinton Street. I guess the question is, could you create a spot or two there that would, have some kind of time limitation, and that would sort of pick up some of the parking that the owner said was lost? That's one question. The other is the spa on the other side, David, on that other slide. So have they, I assume you've been in touch with them, but there's been no reaction to that question, right?
They were notified of this meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So those are my comments.
Okay. Councilor Greenberg.
Yes, so looking at that picture, it doesn't seem like there's room for a car to park there anyway, because you have the driveway at one end and then you have the corner. So you have to be 5 feet within the driveway, and how many feet from the corner in order to park a car?
Well, right now there's no posted restriction. So you
Right.
should be 20 feet away. There is probably room for a car to park here.
Oh, there is? It looks so
Yeah.
short.
The bottom line is, I'm in this area every single day.
Yeah.
And we see people parking all the time in the no parking zone. They park in this no
Yeah.
parking zone. They,
Right.
So now at least it would be officially allowed.
Yeah, okay.
Rampant crime in your ward, Maria. I'm telling you.
I'm on it, Chris.
I trust you are.
Okay, so any last comments? We do have this language. I guess I'll just go ahead and make the motion to approve the language of TPR 880 to make these changes as shown on pages 36 and 37 of the presentation, to add the parking space on the south side of the intersection and remove parking on the north side. And we again have this 20-day appeals period. So any last comments? All right, Danielle, can you call the roll, please? Danielle,
Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Council Markowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 880.
Okay, great. So again, we have to wait until after July 5th. And then so after that point, if there's no appeal, then we would be able to make those changes to the signage. And thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so our next item. This is
There we go.
actually, can Isaac, can you just read this into the record? I'm just gonna turn the light on.
Sure. This is TC 20-23. The request is to change the free 1-hour parking zone on the north side of Washington Street in the area of Honda Village and Walgreens into a free 2-hour parking zone.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the location that we're talking about. It's just this one block of Washington Street between Thornton Street and Jewett Street. So here's what it looks like. This is Honda Village. You can see this sign right here. This is a little close-up of that sign. It's a 1-hour limit. And then a little further down is Walgreens with the same sign, a 1-hour limit. It just seems, especially, I mean, Walgreens has a large parking lot, but especially for Honda Village, you know, we have, our division also handles parking ticket appeals that come in from across the city and parking ticket hearings. And sometimes there's parking tickets issued here for people who are at Honda Village. Maybe they're looking at a new car or something. And 1 hour, it just doesn't seem long enough. So we thought it might make sense for and more convenient for the customers to be able to park for 2 hours. So that is the recommendation, just changing these signs from a 1-hour limit during these hours to a 2-hour limit for this one block. And that this would be the language that we would be voting on to make that change. Okay, so that's the presentation for this item. Any comments? Okay, then I will make a motion to approve the language of TPR 881 to reflect the language shown on this slide 42, to make that change from a 1-hour limit to a 2-hour limit. Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you please call the roll?
Council Markowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. 5-0, TPR 881.
Okay, good. Next one. So this item is TC 1923. This is Devontae Thornton, Parking Manager, and David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to change all the 1-hour on-street parking meters along Washington Street and Center Street in Newton Corner into 2-hour meters. This change does not include the Pearl Street or Richardson Street parking lots. Okay, so these are the areas that we're talking about. The meters on Washington Street, both sides of Washington Street on the north side of Newton Corner, and the 1-hour meters along Center Street on the south side. Okay, here's a view of Center Street. These are the meters that we're talking about, the 1-hour meters that we're recommending to change to 2-hour meters. And these are the meters on Washington Street that we're recommending. So, you know, this is similar to all across the city where we have we used to have more 1-hour meters. We have been changing them in different villages to 2 hours. 1 hour, just, it's really not long enough for a lot of people who are going to the salons here or to the, you know, the pubs or restaurants. 2-hour meters are much more of a convenience to these businesses and these shoppers. So that is our recommendation to approve the items. We would be taking the section of the TPR for this block of Washington Street, changing the 1-hour meters. You see all the 1 hours are highlighted with this gray font or the gray highlight, and replacing them all with 2-hour. That's what we would actually be voting on for Washington Street. And then the same thing for Center Street. We would be replacing the 1-hour meters with 2-hour meters. There's also actually 2-hour meters on Center Street to the north, sort of where the Bertucci's is located. There's some 1-hour meters on the other side of the street. I'm sorry, they're 2-hour meters. So we're fixing an error here in our traffic and parking regulations. They're actually 2-hour meters already on the street. There's an error that they're listed as 1 hour in our TPR, so we're just fixing that along the way. They'll all be 2-hour meters, except, and so all the meters in Newton, all the on-street meters on Washington Street and Center Street will be 2-hour meters. So that is the recommendation. And Councilor Markowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Kozis. I just had two questions. Can they, once you do your 2 hours, can you then put another 2 hours on, or you're timed out? You have to look for another space.
Well, the way that the ordinance was changed by city council not too long ago is if you're parked at a metered space, okay, if you're parked in one of these meters that are going to become a 2-hour meter, after 2 hours, you can't just go and you can't feed the meter, but
Right.
you would have to move to any other place. You can move to the next meter up
Okay, I remember that discussion.
or across the
Right.
street.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
different for the item that we just had talked about on Washington's, in front of Honda Village and Walgreens, because those would now be 2-hour non-metered spaces. So the way that the ordinance is written for non-metered spaces is different. You can't just move up one car length. You need to actually move the car to a space that's beyond the nearest intersection.
Right.
Okay.
The second question I had was, did you talk to any of the merchants in the area? I would imagine they favored a little bit. You know, it's funny how that goes. Some places they don't really want the longer time. Did you have any conversations with merchants in the area just to see what their opinion would be of extending that?
No, only for the previous item with Honda Village.
Yeah. I'm just curious about that.
But I think that I never remember hearing from, because we've done this many times, right? In West Newton and in Newton Center.
I'm thinking of Newton Center.
I never really remember hearing a merchant say, I don't want to.
That's what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to remember the Newton Center conversation. I do remember this coming up, and I'm trying to recall this was in relation to the same type of conversation. You had to move your car after a couple of hours. And is it something that, the merchants say, well, we don't want somebody parked there for 6 hours because, they're probably not doing business with us for 6 hours type of thing. So I was just curious. I don't know whether to vote against. I'm not going to vote against it because of that, but I'm just curious as to what the take is on that.
I mean, I do remember not too long ago, we had a discussion with Patty's about West Newton and creating one space that's, shorter. I think it was a 20-minute space, or I think a 20-minute space we ended up with for takeout.
Mhm. Which went away. We took that away.
No, that's there now.
I thought we repeat. Oh, we didn't repeal? Okay, so
We ended up adding a different meter somewhere else on the block.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean, I guess to answer your question, we didn't go door to door, but we felt like that most of the merchants would be in support, and there still is parking available in the Pearl Street lot and in the Richardson Street lot.
Well, 2 hours doesn't seem like an unreasonable amount of time for, as you say, a lot of stuff you can't get done in an hour, or you'd be pushing it to, assuming somebody was actually checking it that closely. But okay, I'm satisfied. Thanks.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. So, again, this is the language. I will make the motion. This is to approve the language of TPR 882 for TC 1923 to change these meters from 1 hour to 2 hour. And Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Council Markowitz,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
and Mr. Prezant.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 882.
Okay, good. So then after July 5th, I'll work with our parking manager to make these changes to the meters, as long as there's no appeal. And then our last item of the night is TC 1823, Devontae Thornton, Parking Manager, and David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to change the 30-minute space and the 1-hour meter on Charles Bank Road into 2 long-term metered parking spaces. Okay, so this is this area. So this is this area you're coming off of, I guess, Nonantum Road. You're coming off Charles Bank. You're not going on to St. James, but continuing all the way around. It's, you know, you're coming in this way, and this is where you're merging with the Pike traffic coming off the Pike right there. So this is the Pike eastbound exit. No, westbound, sorry. This is the westbound exit of the Pike, merging with Charles Bank Road right here in Newton Corner. So we have 2 parking spaces. Well, we have several metered parking spaces down here. These are long-term metered spaces that are very underutilized, actually. And this is the area that we're talking about. Oh, I don't have a picture, do I? Okay, that's too bad. So we used to have 2 meters side by side at this location. There used to be a dentist that did business right in this building, I believe, that had, I think some of his clients were children with disabilities, and they had a lot of special vans that came in. So we took one of the meters out and created a loading zone right there. So there was only 1 meter left. And that dentist retired. And so we just basically have this space here that has several long-term meters, then this sort of random loading zone, and then 1 meter that's a short-term meter. And so we just finished changing all these other meters to 2-hour meters. We thought it made sense to be consistent on Charles Bank Road with the long-term meters and create just 2 more. All this really does is create 2 more long-term meters in this little space right here. So that is the recommendation. I also took this opportunity to clean up and fix some mistakes that I found in the TPR for Charles Bank Road. You know, we often find different errors in the TPR. When we start looking at one thing, we see that we need to sort of fix other measurements. So really all we're doing is creating 2 long-term meters and fixing mistakes that we found along the rest of the street without changing any of the signage on the whole rest of Charles Bank Road. And that's that would be this language right here that we would be voting on. Councilor Markowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Real quick, you know, that's an interesting site. We had a land use petition to put a daycare center right where that dentist was a couple of years ago, and we rejected it, which, you know, we don't reject too many petitions, but it was because of safety concerns we had about the in and out there. So I guess anything that reduces activity there is probably a good thing, but it was just a really, you know, the guy had gone and actually bought the building. I mean, he had actually, you know, put his money down, and we told him, no, you can't do it because it's just too much traffic there. So thanks for the, and you said they're underutilized right now?
I mean, it's a very good place to park for people who maybe live in somewhere in Newton or nearby that want to take the express bus into Boston. We have the express bus comes right down here, right?
Well, there's a lot of businesses in there
and
too.
There's businesses. So I mean, there's also a lot of parking in Newton Corner. We have parking garages, we have metered parking. We have the express buses that come through. So I think we're just trying something different here that maybe makes a little bit more sense and is more consistent.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I will make the motion to approve the language of TPR 882 for TC 19. Oh,
883.
23. Wait,
It's TPR 883.
You're right. I was on the wrong page. TPR 883 for TC 1823. To approve the language as shown on slides 52, 53, and 54 of the presentation. Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fishman,
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Mr. Kosis.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 883.
All right, and that was our last item. Our next meeting is in less than a month. On July 13th is our July meeting. We're probably not going to have an August meeting. We usually don't. So thank you all for tonight's meeting, and we'll see you back on July 13th. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.